My brother impersonated me on social media to borrow money from my friends. I exposed him, and now he's lost everything. I'm M, a 27-year-old guy from Ohio, the responsible one in my family. I work in tech, live in a modest apartment, and have spent years playing the role of the dependable son, friend, and brother. It's a quiet life, predictable even, and I like it that way. But life has a way of getting complicated when you're tied to people who thrive on chaos. My younger brother C, 25, is the walking embodiment of that chaos. C has always been a whirlwind, a mix of charm, ambition, and complete disregard for the fallout of his actions. He's got this magnetic personality that draws people to him, effortlessly, it seems. Friends and strangers alike get swept up in his grand plans, the next big thing he's cooking up. Only problem? Nothing he starts ever actually succeeds. He has no problem dreaming big, but none of the patience or discipline to follow through. For years, I've been there to pick up the pieces. Covered his rent, lent him money, helped him out when he got fired, again. C's troubles always seem like someone else's fault in his version of events. Like the universe is conspiring against him, and he's simply unlucky. I kept bailing him out, mostly to keep the peace in the family, but also because, as much as I hate to admit it, I didn't want to see him completely unravel. He's my brother after all. But last year, I hit my limit. I finally told him, no more. He was shocked, called me heartless for abandoning him, but I was done. He'd have to figure things out on his own. After that, we barely spoke. I figured he'd eventually move on, find another investor in his life. What I didn't expect was the extent he'd go to for his next scheme. It started innocently enough. About 2 months ago, I got a text from an old college friend asking if I was all right. Then more messages started coming in, mostly people asking if I needed help. Friends were worried, offering money, asking if I wanted to talk. I had no idea what was happening. Finally, my buddy Jay called, sounding seriously concerned. "Hey man, if you need money, you can just ask," he said. I was dumbfounded. I told him I had no clue what he was talking about. Jay then explained that he'd gotten a message from me on social media saying I'd lost my job, was behind on rent, and needed cash fast. The messages were oddly personal, using phrases and details only I'd know. Whoever was behind this fake account wasn't just impersonating me. They knew me well enough to mimic my style perfectly. There was only one person who could pull something like this off, C. I texted him right away, asking if he was pretending to be me online to ask people for money. His response was defensive. "Do you really think I'd stoop that low?" he wrote, full of indignation. But I knew C's tricks too well to buy his denial. I needed proof. To catch him, I created a fake social media profile, posing as an old friend from high school who'd recently moved out of state. I messaged myself, the fake version of me, and within minutes, he replied. He spun a story about how I'd lost my job, was facing eviction, and urgently needed money. He even threw in some humble requests, saying he didn't want to burden family, that he was too embarrassed to ask for help directly. It was all classic C, half lies mixed with emotional manipulation. But then, he took it further. In the fake chat, I started talking about our parents' financial struggles, hinting that I might need to ask them for their life savings if I couldn't come up with the money soon. My parents didn't have much saved. They'd worked all their lives just to retire with a small cushion. The thought of him using them as leverage made me see red. I knew what I had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. I confronted C in person the next day. I didn't want to give him any wiggle room, so I brought printouts of our fake conversation and screenshots of the messages he'd sent to my friends. When I laid it all out on the table, his face went pale. At first, he tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a joke and that I was overreacting. Then he switched tactics, claiming he'd been desperate and had no other choice. When that didn't work, he got angry, accusing me of being self-righteous and holier than thou. He tried to make me feel like the bad guy for even questioning him. But then he made a misstep that sealed his fate. "If you tell anyone about this," he said, his voice low and menacing, "I'll ruin you, Em. You think you're so perfect, but I know things about you. Things that make people look at you differently. Everyone has skeletons." It was a thinly veiled threat, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. For the first time I saw through his bravado, and I realized he was terrified. He wasn't just in debt. He was in deep with people who wouldn't hesitate to collect by any means necessary. I didn't report him to the police, as tempting as it was. But I couldn't let this slide either. My friends deserved to know the truth, and my parents needed to be aware before he roped them into his mess. So I gathered all the evidence, every screenshot, every fake profile, every request he'd sent pretending to be me. Then I called a family meeting. Our parents were worried when they showed up, and seeing them made what I was about to do that much harder. They loved C, despite all his faults, and I hated knowing how much this was going to hurt them. C arrived last, sauntering in as if he hadn't a care in the world. But the second he saw me with the evidence, his expression shifted. He knew this wasn't a casual conversation. I laid everything out, explaining how he'd impersonated me to scam friends, how he'd used my name to manipulate people into giving him money, and how he'd even talked about taking our parents' savings if his plans fell through. I watched as the realization dawned on them, as they started piecing together the lies he'd told over the years. Our dad spoke first, his voice filled with disbelief. "See, how could you do this? Your own brother, your own family? Don't you feel any shame?" But C, true to form, doubled down. "What was I supposed to do?" he snapped. "I've been struggling, and M wouldn't help me. All he cares about is himself, his perfect little life." He went on, painting himself as the victim, as if my refusal to keep funding his reckless lifestyle had forced him into this. Our mom tried to reach out to him, but he brushed her off, railing on about how he'd been betrayed by his own family. When he realized none of us were buying his story, he turned to me with venom in his eyes. "You've always looked down on me," he spat, voice full of bitterness. "Mr. Responsible, Mr. Perfect, you think you're better than me, but you're just as flawed as anyone else." I didn't respond. I just let him talk, let him spill out every ounce of resentment he'd held on to for years. Finally, when he was done, I looked him in the eye and said, "You're my brother, C. I've tried to help you, but you can't keep using us to dig yourself out of the holes you create." He stormed out after that, slamming the door behind him. My parents were devastated. They spent the next few hours questioning themselves, wondering if they'd failed him somehow. I didn't have any answers for them. All I knew was that C had made his choices, and now he'd have to live with them. Over the following weeks, the fallout was brutal. My friends spread the word, and C's reputation crumbled. He tried reaching out to mutual acquaintances, but by then, everyone knew about the scam. He'd burned too many bridges, and now he was facing the consequences. Then one night, he showed up at my apartment, looking defeated. He told me he'd tried to pay back some of the people he owed, but he'd borrowed money from the wrong kind of people. I could tell by the way he was sweating, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, that he was in serious trouble. I wanted to feel sorry for him, but all I could think was how he dragged us all into this mess. He begged me for help, saying he'd changed, that he'd learned his lesson. But I couldn't bring myself to believe him. Too many lies, too many chances wasted. I told him he'd have to figure this one out on his own. He left that night, and I haven't seen him since. Word is, he moved out of state, probably hoping for a fresh start where no one knows him or the mess he left behind. Every once in a while, I hear snippets through the grapevine. He's working odd jobs, trying to stay under the radar. Some people say he's laying low. Others think he's still finding ways to hustle unsuspecting strangers. As for me, I've made peace with the fact that I can't save him. Sometimes, letting go is the only way forward. My parents, on the other hand, struggled. They couldn't simply write him off. He's their son. They still hold out hope that he'll eventually come around, find his way back to some semblance of a responsible life. And while I understand their need to believe in him, I've set my boundaries. I told them I won't be dragged into his schemes, no matter how desperate he might get. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized C was always searching for something. Approval, validation, respect. But he never seemed to understand that these things have to be earned, not demanded or manipulated. He used to be the kid with all the potential in the world, but somewhere along the line he became so focused on shortcuts that he forgot how to actually build something meaningful. In a way, exposing him brought me some closure. I'd spent years feeling like I was caught in his orbit, forced to play along with his games. But now, I'm free to focus on my own life, my own friends and my own goals, without the constant weight of his problems hanging over me. There's a sadness in knowing that my own brother became the villain of his own story, but maybe he'll find a way to turn it around. Maybe he won't. At this point, that's up to him. So to anyone reading this, if you've ever dealt with family drama like this, know that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go. You don't owe anyone endless forgiveness, especially when they've proven they'll just abuse it. Oh, and if you want more real-life stories that make you feel better about your own family chaos, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and stick around for more.